I remember when Ainenechi first came to our compound, a quiet woman with tired eyes and a heart heavy with unspoken grief. She was married to Ainenechi, a man well known in our neighborhood not for his kindness, but for the way his voice would shake the walls of their small apartment whenever he spoke to her. For 4 years, their marriage had been childless, and in a place like Ainenechi, where people believe a woman's worth is tied to the children she bears, Ainenechi bore the weight of silent judgment from both her husband and the society around her. Every morning, before the sun fully rose over the city, I would see her sweeping their tiny veranda, her wrapper tied tightly around her waist, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had long been accustomed to suffering. Ainenechi, however, barely acknowledged her presence. Then came the morning I will never forget. It was early, and the scent of frying akara from the roadside stalls mixed with the sharp aroma of burning firewood. I heard a sharp voice cut through the stillness. "Look at you, eating eggs like a hungry goat," Ainenechi spat, standing over Ainenechi, who had just taken her first bite of breakfast. "You are here devouring another woman's offspring while your mates are carrying their own in their wombs." The silence that followed was suffocating. Ainenechi's hand trembled as she pushed the plate away. I saw the way her shoulders rose and fell, the way her lips pressed together as she fought to hold back tears. She had heard these words before, but today, something in them broke her a little more. That evening, when I found her sitting alone by the compound's water tank, I asked, "Ainenechi, why do you let him speak to you like that?" She gave me a tired smile, one that did not reach her eyes. "What choice do I have, Mama Ada?" she said. "If I leave, the world will say I failed as a wife. If I stay, I am reminded every day that I am not enough. But life, as they say, has a way of testing a woman's strength." One evening, Ainenechi returned home to find Ainenechi sitting on the edge of their bed, her hands clutching a brown hospital envelope. She had gone for tests, praying for a way forward, praying that maybe, just maybe, IVF could give her the child she longed for. Instead, the doctors told her she had fibroids. Ainenechi barely let her finish explaining before he laughed bitterly. "So, not only are you barren, but your womb is diseased as well?" She told him about the surgery the doctors recommended. She told him about the costs. "You think I am a money-making machine," he barked. "You will find your own way to fix your rotten womb." From that night, something shifted in Ainenechi. The next morning, she tied her headscarf, stepped out of the house, and found work. She washed clothes, swept compounds, even worked as a nanny for a wealthy businessman named Ainenechi, whose wife had died in childbirth, leaving him with a 2-year-old son. At first, it was difficult for her, cradling another woman's child when she longed for her own. But the boy, little Ainenechi, had a way of reaching for her, his tiny fingers curling around hers as if he had chosen her to love him. "You have the heart of a mother," Ainenechi told her one evening, as he watched her soothe Ainenechi to sleep. "A mother with no child of her own," she whispered. Ainenechi's eyes softened. "A child is not only born from the womb but from love. And I see that in you." For the first time in years, Ainenechi felt seen. But peace does not last long for a woman trapped in a loveless marriage. One night, Ainenechi confronted her. "You spend all day in another man's house, laughing with him, caring for his child. Do you think I don't hear the whispers? You have turned into a shameless woman." "I am working," she said, her voice steady. "For my surgery. For us." His laughter was cold. "For us. If you spent less time playing mother to another man's son, maybe you would finally have children of your own." That night, she made a decision. She would quit. She would find another way. But fate had different plans. The very next day, Ainenechi offered her a salary increase, double her pay. With that money, she could afford her surgery in a few months. She just needed time to think. When she got home, she was met with a sight that stole the air from her lungs. For the first time in years, Ainenechi felt seen. But peace does not last long for a woman trapped in a loveless marriage. One night, Ainenechi confronted her. "You spend all day in another man's house, laughing with him, caring for his child. Do you think I don't hear the whispers? You have turned into a shameless woman." "I am working," she said, her voice steady. "For my surgery. For us." His laughter was cold. "For us. If you spent less time playing mother to another man's son, maybe you would finally have children of your own. That night, she made a decision. She would quit. She would find another way. But fate had different plans. The very next day, Eukenna offered her a salary increase, double her pay. With that money, she could afford her surgery in a few months. She just needed time to think. When she got home, she was met with a sight that stole the air from her lungs. A woman, pregnant, her belly round and undeniable, sat on her couch, rubbing her stomach with a smirk. Odinaka stood beside her, arms crossed. "This is a marker," he said, his voice carrying an arrogance that made Ainenechi sick. "She is carrying my child. Since you have failed me, I found someone else. A complete woman." Ainenechi felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath her feet. While she had been struggling to give him a child, he had already replaced her. Tears blurred her vision, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she did the one thing Odinaka never expected. She picked up her phone and called Eukenna. "I will take the job," she said, her voice loud enough for Odinaka to hear. His fury was immediate. "You dare choose another man over your own husband? This was never a marriage," she said quietly. Odinaka threw her out that night. She arrived at Eukenna's house with only a small bag, her heart heavy, her future uncertain. But when she told him everything, he simply nodded. "You are safe here," he said. For the first time in years, she felt free. Months passed, and finally, the day of her surgery came. Eukenna held her hand as they wheeled her into the theater. But something unexpected happened. As the doctors began the procedure, they stopped. Murmurs filled the room. "She's not just carrying fibroids," one of them said in disbelief. "She's carrying a baby. A miracle baby." Ainenechi barely heard their voices before darkness took her. When she woke up, Eukenna was sitting beside her, holding a tiny baby girl. "You carried her all this time and didn't even know," he said, tears in his eyes. She could barely breathe as she reached out, touching her daughter's tiny fingers. Meanwhile, in another part of the hospital, Odinaka was on his knees, his hands trembling. Amaka had lost their baby. The same child he had abandoned Ainenechi for had died before he could take his first breath. The news spread quickly. The same people who once mocked Ainenechi now called her blessed. Odinaka came to her hospital room, begging for forgiveness. "I was a fool," he wept. "Please, give me a second chance." She looked at him, the man who had broken her spirit, and simply said, "I forgave you the day you threw me out. But forgiveness does not mean a second chance." He walked away, shoulders slumped in defeat. Years later, Ainenechi and Eukenna grew closer. Love, real love, found its way to her, and when he finally asked her to be his wife, she said yes, and this time, she was truly loved. The lesson: a woman's worth is not defined by her ability to bear children. Life has a way of rewarding those who endure. And sometimes, what we think is the end is only the beginning.